What is a fake fan? That is an interesting question that has popped up in some heated discourse around a rumored Nintendo remake/remaster of the Zelda game Ocarina of Time, and the perception from some of the usual suspects that one of the game's races, the Gerudo, needs to be updated for a modern audience's standards. Ah yes, this is a song and dance I am very well acquainted with indeed. A refrain frequently sung as both sides of the aisle try to claim loudly and proudly that they are the true fans. Some with more veracity than others. But it is a long-toothed argument indeed at this point. Old game becomes popular, attracts a great big huge following, and soon enough, from within that throng comes the cry, "Racist!" followed swiftly by all kinds of demands. Many then turn to these people and shout back, "Shut up, tourist! Fake fan!" And they recoil in outrage. They're not fake fans, they've been here for years, put in the labor to claim their spots. You're the fake fan here, gatekeeper. Oh goody, there's my favorite word already, gatekeeping. My old and much adored topic, and one that not a single person so far has delivered even one argument against. A 100% victory rate for gatekeeping. Quite literally, the perfect argument, even in our otherwise divided times. Indeed, part of my inspiration for doing this video was retweeting one of the people involved, saying gatekeepers are not welcome in the Zelda community, which in and of itself is, of course, gatekeeping. Thus I respond that no leftist has ever made a principled argument against gatekeeping, and desperate to prove my point, the they them in question swiftly blocks me. Like I said, a 1000% success rate. Anywho, let us ask then and answer one simple question. What is a fake fan? Let us begin by defining the term. The most immediately obvious would be inherent within the term itself. A fake fan is someone that professes or claims to be a fan of something, but in reality is not. Now, that already constitutes a rather subjective declaration, and it implies that there exists some quantifiable threshold, some critical mass of dedication, action, or adoration, whereby a person may be said to have become a genuine fan. This would further imply that once upon a time we were all, in a sense, fake fans of one thing or another. That definitionally we will all have to be fake fans initially, before we attain enlightenment and become real fans. There is a certain appeal and truth to that. Yet in this particular case, it somewhat misses the mark, for the concept of the fake fan is by no means a novel invention, although the implications of today differ vastly from those of, say, the 90s, and the implications are very different and far more severe. But for the sake of order, let's lay it out from the start. Fake fans existed before, fake in the most purely practical and transactional meaning of the term. Individuals who latched onto a cultural phenomenon merely to appear popular or to fit in, often carving out for themselves a particular niche wherein they might bask in borrowed prestige. Often to the point even of convincing themselves that they were there for pure reasons. Remember the Guildmaster's girlfriend, the Queen Bee in World of Warcraft, the one everyone coddled and showered with in-game gifts? That is a perfect example of just this phenomenon, and many such examples proliferated in the early days of geekdom and sundry hobbies. People, often women, though not exclusively, who entered these domains first and foremost to garner attention and approval, as, well, in aforementioned example, their very presence in and of itself was, valuable in these circles, who entered these domains first and foremost then to garner attention and approval. With the subsequent meteoric rise in popularity of gaming and geek culture at large, this tendency has only become more popular since. A lot more popular. With the original gamer girl spawning entire new genres of performative enthusiasts. The e-girl, the Twitch thought, the Twitter cosplayer, and their manifold variations, though, to be fair, there is at least something sort of honest about the girl who merely puts her tits out on the internet, flashing her assets online. I mean, she's not exactly being, subtle about this, not being circumspect, is she? She wants attention and then, logically, money. infinitely preferable to the far more duplicitous types that pretend to be something they are not in order to attain both. There was a particularly amusing example of this just last year, where a woman from Thailand faked an entire esports career, pretending to play games whilst using a software to let her boyfriend play for her. Now that is commitment to the grift right there. And hey, attention remains a decidedly desirable and valuable commodity, one for which many have undertaken feats of almost heroic absurdity throughout history. A fact I imagine the person who so helpfully proved my gatekeeping point earlier, Jess Rappaport, is intimately familiar with, as she, hello YouTube, is a woman plus, who spends a remarkable amount of time taking pictures of herself to post online, as she, quote, finds herself to be very hot. And who also just so happens to be, heavy quotation marks, lesbian. Now, I am, of course, not a mind reader, but I suspect this behavior may indicate a certain fetishistic undercurrent, and some pretty obvious attention-seeking behavior as well. Anywho, to finally drag, badumtish, this topic back to Zelda, last month there were rumors that Nintendo was looking to remaster Ocarina of Time, which, amusingly, is the only Zelda game I have actually ever played. Making me too a rather fake fan on the particularities of the Zelda topic, but fortunately, I do know quite a bit about the cultural side of this. Rumors that have since, by the way, been confirmed. In response to this, a segment of the Zelda fandom, instead of celebrating, decided it was time to fix the orientalism tropes in Ocarina of Time, this being the recently mentioned Gerudo. And why are they doing this? Why is this necessary? You know damn well why. It's because it's racist. Well, progressivism is nothing if not predictable. And this, of course, ignited a storm of pushback, rightly so, mind you, as the complaint is hardly new. Reddit posts, scholarly adjacent articles, and ye-olde Tumblr rants decrying the Gerudo and their allegedly racist ways. All of this stretch back for years now, punctuated here and there by accusations of transphobia. Just for good measures and bonus rupees, I imagine. And one of the chief accusations that was flung this way and that was, you are not a real fan. Occasionally enhanced by another classic accusation, with the person who declared our delicious brown desert dwellers to be racist caricatures, stating, of course, that everyone against her is, wait for it, Nazis. Again, nothing if not predictable. This ritual invocation of the ultimate conversation stopper, however, did not have its desired effect, and the progressive elements, naturally, were branded tourists in their own right. Our aforementioned they-them just report, owner of a major Zelda fan account on Twitter, and as unsurprisingly a card-carrying progressive, found herself accused of fake fan status as well, for not having played every title in the 40-plus year series, a charge she dismissed as gatekeeping. So, who precisely then is the fake fan here? On the one hand, I do not believe, in the defense of Jess Rappaport here, that missing a single installment in so venerable a franchise disqualifies one from the ranks of fandom. On the other hand, however, I likewise do not believe that merely operating a fan site, paradoxical that may sound, automatically qualifies one for fan status either. For the self-same reasons referred to earlier, not all who cling to a cultural artifact do so from pure love of the thing itself. Many, then as now, do so because it furnishes them with the attention they crave, so obviously so in this person's case, and thus might drive them to making something like a fan site precisely for attention rather than for the thing. Now, I will grant that there was probably at some point a genuine spark of love, or at least, as mentioned, a spark for the attention that love so reliably generated. Yet, While the proverbial fake gamer girl once secured popularity with niche enclaves, and that was fine enough in and of itself, as this was not even that much of a problem. Attention-seeking behavior is hardly a new phenomenon. But our current cultural moment introduces something far more corrosive. Popularity in the wider societal sense. The popularity obtained from having the correct politics. This is the true dividing line between a fan and a fake fan, and the entire reason why we even need to make the distinction in the first place. Because if you were doing this for attention, just to fit in, then the politicization of media and virtually all facets of life that started in the 2000s and 10s offered up an opportunity for more widespread appeal. And if you're always seeking to fit in, there was only ever one viable option: progressive liberal dogma. And our current examples of fake fans certainly fit perfectly into that category. Politics opened up a path for general approval rather than niche fandom approval. And once this path was laid open to them, most were all too eager to torch the niche in favor of, quite literally, the wider audience. So they have adopted the most basic position on this they can, the everything is political critical lens. This is what makes you a fake fan, to place the ever-mutating progressive politics, which by definition can never be truly satisfied with any outcome, no matter how many sacred cows are ritualistically slaughtered, above the thing you profess to love. Because to do so will inevitably lead to the destruction of the thing you claim to love. Seniority does not matter. I don't care how long you have been in a fandom. It is an irrelevant statistic in most cases, particularly in this one. Consumption does not matter. I don't care how many games you've purchased or how many plastic master swords you own. If your actions can provably and reliably be shown to be to the long-term active detriment of the thing you, quote, love, then you are not a fan of that thing. One can only ever imagine otherwise if one's worldview is fundamentally transactional. I have invested X, therefore I am owed Y, and I am allowed to subtract Z. But being a fan of something is not a transaction for approval. It's not a plus-minus game. It simply means you like that thing. And there is an undeniable purity in that. We all know this instinctively, and we know it intellectually as we have witnessed the pattern across countless franchises. It is invariably those crying racism that rends fandoms asunder. But for the sake of argumentative charity, let us have a look at the critical argument. With an eye towards maximum charitability, the argument is that one should be critical towards the things one loves. True enough, lack of critique is what has landed us in our current day one patch and endless DLC days, not to mention the general decline in quality overall. Yet, that is not the argument actually being advanced here. The critique is not about gameplay, fidelity, narrative coherence, or aesthetics. It is a political and moral indictment. It is racist. If you make it not racist, the game will be better. That is the claim in its most generous formulation. So then, firstly, subjective. Secondly, in the progressive view of the world, there is literally no such thing as not racist. There is only racist or anti-racist. And even the latter is still racist, depending upon their skin color, according to the more zealous members of the opposition. But, alright, let us ignore that and entertain the notion, because the crux of my position, after all, is that causing harm to the game by placing politics above the game is what makes you a fake fan. And so, if it does not cause harm, then my position will be rendered untenable. Let's see then, the role of politics in gaming. The inevitable and total everything is political. Can viewing games and entertainment through any number of political lenses genuinely elevate the product? Well, firstly, let's be real here. We are only viewing things through one lens, aren't we? It may bear different names on occasion, critical, intersectional, etc., but it is all, at the end of the day, the same left-wing and progressive lens. Once upon a time then, around 2014 or so, the answer to this question was a cautious yes, maybe? I mean, let's try. What's the worst that can happen? But it is no longer 2014. The grand experiment has run its course and the results stand set in 60-foot tall neon lettering for all with eyes to see. No. Experience has demonstrated, with barely a single exception to prove the rule, that politics in games never improves the game. Every crusade against the male gaze, manifesting in ever more rotund, reptilian, or deliberately unattractive character designs, has flopped with the grace of a Led Zeppelin. Every drive to diversify the cast via the novel innovation of, say, lesbian knights has yielded sales figures comparable to bat soup during the height of the Rona. And every quest to capture that elusive wider market has foundered upon the cruel, uncaring rocks of consumer reality. To then continue striving to bring politics into gaming, for improvement's sake, proves without the shadow of a doubt that you care far more about public approval than about the thing you supposedly love. As whilst these things may still be, at least marginally so, popular in the mainstream, although that too is fading fast, it is certainly not to the benefit of the product. Yet, for the sake of orderly analysis, let us drill specifically into the Zelda case. The Gerudo are deemed problematic because, well, racism ultimately, but how does one substantiate the charge of racism levied against a fantasy race? The most recurring justification appears to be Orientalism. Now, Orientalism is a rather old word, and it is a bad word, you see, because it denotes the East, as specifically viewed from the imperialist West. An a priori moral failing, of course. Consequentially, anything and everything tethered to it, even something so simple as a style of dress, like the belly dancer outfits seen in Zelda, is likewise, therefore, irredeemable. Indeed, even if it has a compelling reason for its existence, like being hot, for example, it is still bad, because it is rooted in the most terrible thing that has ever happened in human history, the West, bringing infrastructure to the East, also known as colonialism. And this is important to understand here, as a key defense of the position we must update the thing, in the case of the Gerudo, is, oh no, we really do like them, honestly. I mean, look at how nice they are. It's just that we don't like what it's rooted in. The Bailey, if you will, to the moat of all Western things are bad. In this instance, one might further note the logical extension of, but we said we liked the Gerudo, we just want to update and improve them. Now, improvements are, of course, ever welcome, provided they are genuine enhancements to the artistic whole of the game. So, update them for what reason? And what does that reason imply the changes will be? This is linked to the original accusation of racism, circumspectly made or otherwise. Orientalism, you see, as seen from the left, is not merely the study of the Orient, itself a rather broad term, which is why it has fallen out of favor. But specifically, Orientalism is the colonial word used to differentiate the Orient from the West. Thus, it is stating that the Orient is observably different from the West. To which you might say, duh. But in the left-wing view, this is of course a negative, as all people, regardless of any local traditions like Izat, for example, are just people, and precisely the same as you and I and everybody else, up until the point where it becomes inconvenient anyways. Therefore, you can in fact like an Orientalist trope, like the previous belly dancer outfit, because it is visually compelling, while simultaneously critiquing not the outfit itself, but the Western gaze that produced the inspiration. The sin of Orientalism is therefore not that it is unflattering or negative, though it can be. Its cardinal offense is that it others the East. Of course, this remains the Bailey, the small village at the bottom of the fort, and agree for even a moment, and a swift-moving laundry list of additional gripes and grievances will rapidly materialize, each more, supposedly, damagingly tropic than the last. But let us pretend for a moment that the problem stopped at the otherization. Having identified the supposed problem, how then ought the Gerudo to be updated? Well, this is where it gets complicated. See, in theory, one could make the argument that basing a species, faction, civilization, etc. on a relatively simplistic and broadly generalistic view, as Orientalism, the academic study, certainly and deliberately was, will not lead to great storytelling. Indeed, this has been the core of the progressive argument since Anita Sarkeesian. Oh, but why can't video games just grow up and do better? Don't you like games? Don't you want them to do better? Well, we entertained that notion once, much to our collective cost. And the problem was that this critical worldview, albeit adept at finding flaws and championing their removal and or fundamental changes, failed again and again, endlessly so, in proposing or developing anything actually superior. Because this does not have any tools with to produce a superior alternative, only tools with which to tear it down. Almost as if the primary purpose of all of this critical lens nonsense was the destruction and destabilization of things, rather than the improvement of things. Oh well. Details. In the specific case of the Gerudo, could Nintendo theoretically craft a richer, more deeply textured race and civilization? Certainly. In the abstract, we can always do better, but is there any realistic chance of such improvements coming from the critical lens? Has the lens ever demonstrably enhanced anything? And more pointedly, has it ever produced a result it itself would deem sufficiently improved to require no further rectification? No, it has not. And the number of examples frankly too long to list. Off the top of my head, turning Luke Skywalker from a boring hero character into a depressed, frumpy old man sucking on green monster milk. Or transforming Galadriel from an ephemeral elf queen into a whiny-ass grumpy girl boss. Or getting the Joker homosexually gangbanged in the prison shower. Switching April O'Neil from a hot and courageous reporter into a dumpy black chick who looks like she's not washed in months. Or the entire ginger genocide. And we are still only scraping away at the surface level of the dung heap that has been the improved, decolonized entertainment of the last decades. Making all of this a moot point that can be simply summarized thus. We should change the Gerudo? Okay. Why? Because Orientalism bad. Okay. Change them into what? Something gay, ugly, and woke. Alright then. Fuck off. As, once more, the purpose of a thing is the result it produces. The progressives may state as often as they wish that the telos of the critical lens is improvement. But when the result is always a chiseling down, a degradation and reduction, an ontological flattening into the sterile arithmetics of checkbox demographics, we can, quite frankly, trust the proof of our lying eyes on this one and determine that it is not a mechanism of improvement, that they are in fact lying to us. And whether they know that they are lying or not, frankly, makes absolutely no difference. And may I state further as well, not everything needs to be some deep, multi-layered exploration into the metaphysical state of humanity's soul. We need not constantly stroke our metaphorical intellectual cocks to 7-dimensional geometrical patterns, and we most certainly do not need to dunk ourselves into the endlessly dark and murky waters of implicit biases. The Gerudo are a race of tall, deliciously brown-skinned anime women with fiery red hair who prefer skimpy silk clothing. Oh, and who, by the way, have no men to breed with either. That's fine. That is done and finished right there. That is more than enough to get me interested, which is the entire point of a video game. I don't care if it appeals to the male gaze. I don't care if it fetishizes the other. I don't give a shit if it is an entire race of women literally designed to fulfill a harem trope, which they indeed are. The only thing I care about is if they make the video game more interesting. And presented with the absolute 0% chance the critical lens can make it any more interesting, I will simply reject it. As, you know what? I will restate for the umpteenth time that brevity is the soul of wit here. You don't need to layer upon layer upon layer upon layer this civilization. What we have is more than good enough. So no. Even with all the goodwill in the world, it is simply no longer possible to entertain the notion that any critical lens can in any way whatsoever improve upon a product. This has been proven and borne out through countless sacrifices as it is, and no perceived cultural damage or slight caused by a hot chick in a belly dancer outfit outweighs the inevitable scouring of the source material. Returning us finally and fully to the original inquiry. What is a fake fan? With a well-substantiated answer. I have defined it in the past as someone who places politics above the fandom. And that definition holds true still to this day, though we may well now expand and add upon it by recognizing why, as we have done today. Anyone that is willing to take or champion actions that will all but certainly lessen and degrade the thing they purport to love is a fake fan. This means that anyone arguing for fixing or otherwise improving things because of flaws that can only be perceived through a critical lens, an expressly political lens, are fake fans. Regardless of how long they have been fake fans, or how much of the content they have consumed whilst being fake fans. It is all irrelevant next to the simple fact that they will happily sacrifice the thing in the name of political approval and left-wing morality. In the fake fans' eyes, it can safely be said, therefore, that the fandom is not a goal in and of itself. It is to them nothing more than a vessel for public approval, an inherently selfish motivation that can only ever harm the very community it claims to serve. We could then expand upon this with intent, whether somebody knows that this is what they are doing, or if they genuinely believe through ignorance more so than anything else these days, that their worldview could improve upon the thing. That too is possible, but the charitable interpretation has already been stretched to the breaking point as it is, and well beyond it in most cases. To the point where the simplest answer is simply gatekeeping. Call them what they are, fake fans. Humiliate them, slam the door in their face wherever you can, whilst obviously understanding the limitations of gatekeeping from a fandom perspective as well. Because, as we saw exhaustively demonstrated in the alt-right playbook video, dialogue is probably quite simply not an option, for the simple reason that they will not engage in dialogue. They have already determined us to be the bad guys. They've already determined that what we stand for is an a priori bad. The very idea of the existence of something like Orientalism is an unforgivable sin that can only ever be expelled. It cannot be tolerated, it cannot be reformed, not in a left-wing lens anyways, without endless reformations to follow, and endless complaints that not enough was done, leading to the only solution in a sense being the removal or destruction of it. And yet again, I care not if they have the intellectual honesty to admit it. It is the fact and the inevitable consequence of their actions and worldview, as again exhaustively documented both today and in countless other examples across the years. Fake fans are a cancer and a poison to any fandom that should, once more, whenever possible, be gate-kept, no matter how much they claim to have been there for ever so long and have consumed ever so much of it. The poison spreads from the core regardless of its intention, like a piece of uranium lodged at the heart of, in this case, Zelda, in other cases, Warhammer, and so on. There we have it then. What is a fake fan? Answered, substantiated, and hopefully put to bed once and for all. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.